Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laik Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. We start a new episode, episode 16, The Science of Phi Pattern. This is a new and powerful lens through which we must explore Holophase model before we go any further, because it shines new light upon our core concepts and introduces a new science, the science of Phi pattern. An introduction to Phi pattern science. The root of pattern. Primitive comparability, Phi. At the root of Phi pattern science is not an object, not a substance, not a field, not an observer. It is a primitive permission, the possibility of lawful distinction. This primitive comparability is denoted by Phi. Phi is the lawful possibility that this differs from that in a way that can, in principle, enter public structure. It is the root condition that makes any pattern possible, not as a thing, but as the permission for differences to exist and be tracked. Phi is not a substance. It is not energy. It is not space-time. It is not consciousness. It is not any entity that could be named or pointed to. Phi is the condition for all of these, the root permission from which all public reality grows. The circular nature of Phi. Here is the first profound discovery. Primitive comparability must be circular. If there were an absolute zero, a privileged origin, a universal baseline, then pattern would depend on access to that absolute. But no observer has access to absolutes. Every measurement is relational. Every comparison is between terms, not against a fixed standard. The circle is the minimal structure that supports this. On a circle, there is no privilege zero. Only relational offsets matter. You can return to the same point after traversing a loop. The number of times you wind around can be counted, and continuous variation can yield discrete residues. Phi is therefore circle-valued. Phi x S1. This is not a mathematical decoration. It is the structural consequence of a relational foundation. And it has profound implications: gauge freedom, closure, winding, and the emergence of discrete structure from continuous relational variation. The relational principle. From the circular nature of Phi, a decisive principle follows. Absolute Phi is not publicly accessible. What is publicly accessible are differences, delta Phi, relations, and invariants built lawfully from them. This is the gauge relational heart of the science. If a claim depends on an inaccessible absolute, it is not public pattern science. It is private reconstruction or hidden assumption. Pattern identity lives in what survives lawful transformation, not in what depends on private coordinates. The public content of a Phi pattern is relational invariant structure. Part 2. What a Phi pattern is. A Phi pattern is not an object, not a substance, not a thing in itself, not merely a label. A Phi pattern is a persistent relational structure that can be identified through lawful comparison and remains intelligible under declared lawful transformations. This definition carries 4 inseparable conditions. Comparability. There must be lawful grounds to distinguish and relate structure. Without comparability, there is no pattern to identify. Relationality. The pattern is in the relation, not in a hidden absolute value. The pattern is what survives transformation, not what depends on private coordinates. Persistence. Enough structure remains stable to support identification. A fleeting fluctuation is not a pattern. A pattern must have enough continuity to be recognized. Lawful transformability. Sameness and difference are judged under declared admissible transformations. Without declared transforms, same is undefined. Pattern is deeper than repetition. It includes recurrence, symmetry, asymmetry, constrained variation, topological continuity, defect structure, recurring organization, and stable invariant bundles. Pattern identity is invariant relational continuity under lawful transformation. This is the core thesis. Everything else unfolds from it. Part 3. The structure of legibility. Windows and finite access. Every pattern claim is made from somewhere. Every observation happens through some window. A window is the finite declared support region from which a pattern claim is read, specifying where the claim holds, over what duration, at what resolution, under what conditions. Windows are always finite. Resolution, duration, sensitivity, computation, all have bounds. No observer, no tool, no model has infinite lawful access. This yields a principle that is both humbling and rigorous. Humility is structural honesty, not weakness. We do not see the whole pattern. We see through windows. The science is in the disciplined handling of that fact. Difference as first readability. The first public fact of a phi pattern is not what phi is absolutely. The first public fact is how phi differs. Difference is not just not the same. It is structured contrast that can be measured, compared, tracked across transformations, and built into higher order pattern claims. Same, different, and how much difference are the primitive readability of phi pattern science. Local legibility on a circle. Because phi is circle valued, ordinary linear reading is not directly available. To read local change, we use lawful local unwrapping, local lifts phi that represent phi linearly in a neighborhood. These lifts are not absolute truth. They are tools for legibility, not the pattern itself. They carry an essential ambiguity. Phi B plus 2pn. Only what survives this ambiguity, what is lift invariant, is public phi pattern structure. From such local readability, the first stable local carrier of change appears. A equals d phi. A is not the pattern itself. It is the first public face of how the pattern changes locally. A phi pattern has a layered local signature, local value behavior, rate of change, curvature of change, higher order local variation. These layered signatures, called jets, encode how the pattern behaves in a neighborhood. They are the local fingerprint of the pattern. But public access is always finite. We never certify infinite local detail. We certify finite depth local structure under declared ceilings and uncertainty budgets. The local fingerprint is rich enough to support lawful pattern identity claims, but never complete in an absolute sense. From one differentiated pattern structure, the framework reads three inseparable phases. Time-like rhythm. What becomes time in higher layers? Space-like variation. What becomes space in higher layers? Motion-like relation. What becomes motion in higher layers? These are not separate substances. They are not primitive containers. There are three readout aspects of one underlying phi pattern structure. This is perhaps the deepest inversion. What ordinary science treats as fundamental, time, space, motion, are actually derived pattern readouts. A phi pattern is not lawfully readable everywhere. There are regions where pattern language becomes undefined, unstable, or counterfeit. Defect cores, cut neighborhoods, aliasing zones, resolution limits. Excision is the declared removal of such regions. It is not failure. It is honesty about where pattern language must stop. Phi pattern science includes disciplined silence where pattern language breaks down. Part 4. The Global Dimension. The Atlas Principle. No single window sees the whole. A global phi pattern exists as a lawful stitching of local descriptions across overlapping windows. Global pattern identity is what survives these transitions, what remains invariant when we move from one local description to another. Topological memory. Some global structure is not visible in any single local patch. Consider a closed loop. As you traverse it, phi changes. But because phi is circle-valued, it must return to its starting value modulo 2 pi. The total change is an integer multiple of 2 pi. That integer is the winding number. Holonomy is the residue after traversing a closed path, the memory that the pattern carries of the loop. This is how discreteness emerges from continuity, not by imposed quantization, but by the structure of circular comparability itself. Defects as irreducible structure, where lawful stitching fails irreducibly, where no consistent global description can cover the whole. Defects appear. Defects are not foreign objects. They are the pattern's own obstructions, its stable topological features. Defects carry topological charge, invariant labels that characterize the obstruction. Charge is quantized, conserved under continuous deformation, countable. This yields a profound inversion, not particle first, pattern later, but pattern obstruction first, particle-like behavior later. Part 5. Identity and persistence. The central question. When are two descriptions the same pattern? Phi pattern science answers. Two descriptions are the same phi pattern if and only if they are related by a declared lawful equivalence and preserve the relevant invariance for the declared scope. The fourfold identity. This requires a strict separation of identities that must never be collapsed. Pattern identity. The invariant relational structure under lawful transformations. Claim identity. A specific assertion about a pattern with declared scope. Certificate identity. The certification, refusal, or downgrade outcome. Artifact identity. The supporting evidence objects, logs, procedures. A claim is not the pattern. A certificate is not the claim. Artifacts are not the certificate. This separation is foundational protection of pattern essence. Invariance as the heart. If identity is the question, invariance is the answer mechanism. A phi pattern is known by what remains stable under lawful transformation. Invariance is not optional. It is the core criterion of pattern essence. Phi pattern science becomes a science of declared invariance under declared lawful transforms. Persistence. A pattern is scientifically present only when there is enough relational continuity to distinguish it from noise, artifacts, threshold accidents, hidden preprocessing. Persistence is always scope-bound, depending on window, resolution, uncertainty, boundaries, equivalence conditions. The null pattern. The null pattern is the disciplined baseline in which no persistent relational structure is certifiable under the declared scope and thresholds. This does not mean nothing exists. It means no stable pattern identity can be lawfully certified here given current access. The null pattern prevents forced patterning and narrative overreach. Existence versus legibility. A pattern may exist but not be legible. This distinction is foundational to scientific humility. Failure to certify does not imply non-existence. A pattern may exist but be below resolution, obscured by noise, outside current windows. What we can read is not all that exists. What exists is not all that we can read. Part 6. Change and Emergence. Change without time. Change is lawful transformation between pattern states, not motion inside a pre-given time container. Before and after are derived from transformation ordering, adjacency relations, causal structure, certified pathways. This is a deeper account of change, not dependent on primitive time. Adjacency and nextness. Next is a certified adjacency relation between pattern states, transformational, scale refining, overlap extension, boundary-induced, coupling-driven. Multiple lawful next states are branching under lawful rules, not chaos. Conservation and provenance. Across lawful transformations, some invariants persist, conservation. New structure may lawfully appear, generation. Both require tracking. The principle of pattern conservation. Pattern structure does not appear from nothing, nor vanish into nothing without lawful transformation. Provenance as first class. Every claim must include provenance, the lineage graph of how it was produced, from what sources, under what transformations. Provenance is part of the claim's identity context, not optional metadata. Emergence. Emergence is the appearance of stable, lawful pattern structure at a scale or access regime where new invariants become public. A pattern is emergent when relational organization becomes sufficiently stable, comparable, and invariant-rich to support public identity claims not available at weaker description. Emergence is not magic, not naming, not ex nihilo. It requires source structure, declared transformation, persistence of higher-order organization, identity criteria, loss accounting, uncertainty honesty, public reproducibility. Emergence is a disciplined way pattern structure becomes newly readable, not a break in reality. Part 7. The Observer and Knowledge. Observer closure. The observer is not outside the pattern world. The observer is themselves a phi pattern system, structured, persistent, recursively coupled to other patterns. There is no outside the text spectator. The observer participates in the same pattern reality it studies. Measurement as pattern interaction. Measurement is lawful coupling between pattern systems that leaves structured traces. It produces a trace, state change, new certified window possibilities, uncertainty. Measurement is not a magical bridge from mind to matter. It is pattern interaction all the way down. The measurement certification loop. Measurement and certification form a recursive loop. Measurement creates windows, windows enable certification, certification constrains future measurements. The observer maintains this cycle. There is no first measurement problem. Memory as persistent. Trace memory is persistent trace structure, a pattern stabilized notification that constrains future transformations. Memory is not mental content at this layer. It is trace persistence that changes future possibility. Modeling and prediction. A pattern system can construct an internal pattern of another pattern. Modeling enables prediction, anticipation, constrained response. Prediction is using internal structure to narrow lawful continuations. Failed prediction is diagnostic information. Learning as self-transformation. When prediction fails, a pattern may update itself, revising internal structure while preserving identity. Learning is identity-preserving adaptive change in response to mismatch. Information as constraint. Information is not a substance that flows. It is constraint structure that reduces the space of lawful pattern possibilities under a declared context. What flows are transformations carrying constraint structure. Meaning as usefulness. Meaning is not primitive. It emerges when one pattern structure becomes predictively or usefully constraining for another pattern system. Meaning is relational and functional, a property of the pattern-observer relation, not of the pattern alone. Part 8. Public Science and its Protection. Publicness. Phi pattern science is not private intuition. It is public pattern certification. Publicness requires shared windows, declared conditions, comparable traces, repeatability, uncertainty disclosure. Publicness is not popularity. It is structured cross-observer stability. Replayability and auditability. Replayability means the pattern path can be independently retraced. If a claim cannot be replayed, it is not fully public. Auditability inspects the path for hidden choices shaping outcomes. Hidden choices can create fake invariants, erase real patterns, manufacture apparent order. Falsifiability and refusal. A serious claim declares what would count against it. Falsifiability is the courage to risk contact with reality. When a claim fails certification, it must be refused with diagnostic information. Refusal is not failure, it is success of discipline. The failure taxonomy. A mature science distinguishes why a claim fails. Illegal, constitutional violation. Unidentifiable, insufficient coherence. Underdetermined, multiple outputs. Unreplayable, artifacts insufficient. Out of scope, beyond jurisdiction. Version conflicted, migration ambiguity. Each class teaches something different. Why law becomes necessary? At scale, informal trust fails. Hidden assumptions, selective reporting, institutional drift threaten pattern integrity. The Constitution does not create patterns. It protects lawful public claims about them. It is a protective shell around fragile pattern certification. The Constitution is needed because phi pattern science has become serious, public, and vulnerable. Part 9. The Architecture of Integrity. Anti-smuggling. Smuggling is the insertion of undeclared assumptions that materially change pattern outcome. It is the central corruption mechanism. All material assumptions must be declared. The principle of minimal smuggling. Among accounts of the same evidence, prefer the one with fewest undeclared assumptions. The 6 foundational ports. All handoffs from the pure pattern layer to higher layers must use 6 ports: runtime, patterns to predictions, probability, ignorance to measure, entropy, constraints to counts, energy, change to tallies, intervention, manipulation to effects, regional atlas, domains to modules. No other pathway is lawful. Non-retroactivity. Higher layers may annotate, but cannot retroactively alter pure layer claims. The pattern stands on its own evidence. Learning adds new interpretations. Retroactivity erases old ones. Reference class declaration. Relative claims. Anomaly, rarity, signal require declared reference classes. Undeclared baselines are smuggling. A claim without a declared reference class is a claim without stable meaning. Decision thresholds versus truth claims. Epistemic certification, what is supported, and operational decisions, what action to take, are separate domains. Collapsing them corrupts both. We may need to decide before we know, but that does not make the uncertainty disappear. Part 10. The Philosophical Revelation. What phi-pattern science reveals. Phi-pattern science reveals that the deepest lawful content of public knowledge is not things first, but structured invariance across comparison. It reveals that what can be publicly known with rigor is not simply what can be named, but what can be distinguished, related, stabilized, transformed lawfully, scoped honestly, uncertainty qualified, replayed, audited, challenged, and certified without smuggling. The inversion of substance. Western thought has been dominated by substance ontology, the assumption that reality is made of things. Phi-pattern science inverts this. Things are not the foundation. They are what appear when patterns stabilize. This is not a rejection of the physical world. It is a deeper account of what the physical world is. The end of hidden absolutes. Modern science sought absolute foundations, absolute space, absolute time, absolute simultaneity. Each has fallen. Phi-pattern science explains why. Absolutes are not publicly accessible. Only relations are. This is not a loss. It is the discovery that relations are the real. The re-enchantment of pattern. Pattern was reduced to mere regularity, something to be explained away by laws and mechanisms. Phi-pattern science restores pattern to its rightful place as the primary category of intelligibility. Pattern is not epiphenomenal. Pattern is what there is in its public aspect. The ethical dimension. Phi-pattern science carries an implicit ethics. The ethics of honesty, of anti-smuggling, of refusal as virtue, of escape as integrity. To practice it is to commit to never hiding assumptions, never pretending certainty beyond access, never substituting authority for evidence, never hiding failure, always being willing to learn. Epilogue: The Living Science. This is the complete picture of Phi-pattern science. Pattern first, not things. Phi as the permission for distinction. Only differences are public. Windows, lifts, jets, triunity. Atlases, topology, defects. Fourfold identity, invariance, persistence. Change without time, emergence without magic. Observer closure, pattern studying pattern. Replay, audit, falsifiability, refusal. Anti-smuggling, ports, non-retroactivity. Pattern as primary. This is not a doctrine to be memorized. It is a living framework to be applied, extended, deepened. It is a foundation on which to build in physics, biology, neuroscience, information theory, social science, wherever pattern matters. A phi pattern is not a thing. It is the lawful invariant structure of comparability that becomes publicly readable through differences, local signatures, and global topology. This is the revelation. This is the foundation. This is phi pattern science. Always, peace be upon you.